হচ্ছে? তাহলে কেন বলো তো? বলছে এই যে বলে যাচ্ছে সার্ধ শতবর্ষ, 100 বছর ধরে মানুষটা কিছু গান লিখেছিল, 2300 গান লিখেছিল, তা বলে কি 100 বছর ধরে তার শ্রাদ্ধ করতে হবে? I was at a loss of words. And whenever a Bengali is in difficulty, you have two options, either Rabindranath or Satyajit Ray. So I borrowed a line from Hirok Rajar Deshe and told him, ki korbi bhai, Rajar bodo dukho re, Rajar bodo dukho re. Thank you.
Thank you, Kunal. Now may I request the last speaker speaking against the motion, Ms. Devi Kaur.
Mr. Chairman, sir, ladies and gentlemen, why do you think the great debaters of the city are that side? It's because of their debating skills. It's because they've been asked to defend the indefensible. And that is why they're there. But please beware. Don't be persuaded by rhetoric. I have deep admiration for their debating skills. But today I knew they would have loved to cross the floor, I'm sure. And don't be carried away by their wonderful words, playing around with words, acting skills, and so on. Today, my admiration for them has deepened further because they dared to speak in favor of the motion here in Victoria Memorial. Already, Professor Munshi has said that today is Good Friday and that Christians all over the world, they commemorate Christ's passion. Mr. Vishwanathan said that we are repetitive about commemoration. But you know, it is important to be repetitive about some things. People look forward to something that is familiar, something that would make them feel secure. And yes, Dr. Sharkar, I think you would like to email the Pope because I know that he washed the feet of women and Muslim and he has followed the rituals of commemoration of crucifixion, and on Sunday practicing Christians will be commemorating by celebrating the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Now the theme of the year, that is World Heritage Day, today is the International Day of Monuments and Sites. The theme of the year is Heritage of Commemoration. And I understand that the choice was partly determined by the centennial of the Great War, the First World War. And in this regard, Jeremy Paxman, the BBC reporter, got into big trouble because he called his Prime Minister David Cameron a complete idiot. Now he wasn't objecting to commemorating the war. He was objecting to the term that David Cameron used, which is celebration. He says, who celebrates a war? We've heard so much about war today. It's not that they don't want to commemorate, it's the way we commemorate. And in fact, there are many, many ways in which people commemorate. It's not right to say that it's repetition. Today what has happened is because there is no really substance in the arguments. Mr. Vishwanathan talked about the culture, that he was against the culture of commemoration and not commemoration. Actually, we are talking about the practice. Each year is celebrated differently, Mr. Vishwanathan. Each year, the International Year of Women and so on, they are celebrated. We heard so many delightful stories, we heard so many anecdotes, we heard that the statue is made of stone and so on, but we really didn't understand the whole point. We do have to go back Going back is not regressive. We have to reflect on the past. If you don't pay heed to the past, then you won't understand the present, and your future is definitely at risk. A museum seeks to freeze history, Mr. Gupta. Not at all. Each viewer will look at history differently. Each picture is looked at and reflected upon, and new things are discovered every time. Statues are put up, yes, but sometimes they are regarded as victims, sometimes as martyrs, sometimes as heroes, and on the other side, sometimes as villains and terrorists. Yes, Mr. Gupta, you were being judgmental about it, but the whole debate is about it being a regressive pastime. We are not talking about good or bad. Selecting events and people to commemorate, that may be arbitrary, that's your prerogative. And the way you commemorate is also your prerogative. I got to read about the way the Pacific Islanders commemorate the experience of Pearl Harbor, how it impacted the islanders. So you have the Japanese, you have the Americans and the islanders commemorating Pearl Harbor, the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Now we are talking about governments taking over, parties exploiting. That's precisely my point too. Politicians do politicize tragedies and death and so on. But again, that is not a pastime. It's not a regressive pastime. It's all very serious business. It can be sinister. There are horrors and terrors of the different commemorative sites. But can you call them regressive pastimes? So far as fossilized mines go, well, fossils can be precious unless, of course, somebody calls a person like me an old fossil. That wouldn't be very nice. But fossilized, we don't accept people with rigid, closed minds. But the different ways in which commemorations are carried out, there are beautiful works of art, there are scholarly volumes, there are papers, there are plays, the films, and so on. How can we say that they are the activities of fossilized products of fossilized mines? Now, I wouldn't like to get personal, but I think I'm becoming infected by our political leaders, and so I shall go right ahead and talk about the diehard Zavarians we have across. I would like to know what you thought of the commemorative stamp that was released, the Indian Post released, in honor of St. Xavier's. I wonder what you thought of that. And Mr. Gupta, I remember that you and I worked on the commemorative volume in the sesquicentennial year of La Martiniere, and I didn't think you had a fossilized mind at that time, nearly 30 years ago. So I fail to understand how they can sit here and ridicule the culture of commemoration. In fact, as I told you, my admiration gets deeper and deeper and deeper. It's wonderful how they debated about nothing at all. They didn't have any point. And please remember, we cannot sit here and trivialize the culture of commemoration. Do not wish away Victoria Memorial. It is an iconic symbol of Kolkata. Do not wish away Eiffel Tower. It is an iconic symbol of Paris. Let us respect the culture of commemoration.
Thank you, Ms. Kaur. Now that the debate has gathered enough steam, it's time for the summing up. And as is the practice in exhibition debates, the leader of the opposition gets his turn first. Professor Burji.
「こ Mr. Chairman, sir, ladies and gentlemen, what can I say about the famous rhetoric capabilities of our opponents when they have to stoop to the cheap witticism of Oscar Wilde and say that women have to be listened to and not understood? Absolutely cheap. I assure you, I was listening to understand what the opponents were trying to say very seriously. I took notes. And what do I have on my list? I have on my list Ashok telling us, don't do things to death. Think of petrol. What do I have on my list? He says, look forward, like Petro did. What do I get from Pradeep? He says that think of Germany and think of 9/11 accusing me to be a blind man who had looked at an elephant without knowing what I was talking about. I was precisely talking about the missed opportunity of 9/11, which could have given the Americans the opportunity of identifying with the victims of violence. As far as Germany is concerned, I'll come back to it in a minute. And before that, I want to go to Dr. Schalker. He talked about Hitler and Merkel. He confused Good Friday with Easter. He talked about Germany, and he said, as a categorical statement, that commemoration blinds you, like blind men, to truth. These are basically, ladies and gentlemen, the points that they have brought to the table. As far as Germany is concerned, I've taught in that country and I've researched on Germany. And I think I can claim certain competence in knowing what's happening in that country. Germany has today tried very hard to bring to the understanding of people living in Germany what did happen actually during the Second World War. Go to Frankfurt and go and see how the ghetto has been restored with restoration work of a very serious kind and a museum to support an understanding of what happened. We are basically saying something very simple from this side. Think of what Sujata told you. Commemoration is capturing a moment. Commemoration is remembrance to capture a moment to look forward. She talked about war efforts which were completely misunderstood by our worthy opponents because they were listening, not trying to understand, going by the dictum of their hero, Oscar Wilde. I thought the days of this man were over, Oscar Wilde, but he keeps coming in Calcutta debates. What did she tell us? She said the war efforts that are being made are an attempt to understand war experience in a creative manner. You don't understand it, you just overlook it, you repeat. Think of what you were told by Devi Kaur. Don't be persuaded by rhetoric, I would add, please. Don't be persuaded by cheap rhetoric. Please pay attention to the arguments because we are talking of serious matters. I would repeat, is no point in being anesthetized in our understanding of our past. That might be the professional hazard of doctors, but not of social scientists. Kindly pay attention to the past and think of it creatively so that you open up to lovely opportunities that the mistakes as well as the positive points of the past bring before you. I'm quite sure you have been listening to understand and not to run down people. Please apply your minds and take a rational stand. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Munshi. You did not even require the bell. Mr. Ashok Vishwanathan, you rounded off for the proposition.
Mr. Chairman, sir, ladies and gentlemen, the reason why Mr. Munshi didn't require the bell is that he repeated what the others had said. Summing up doesn't mean saying the same thing again. That is the culture of commemoration, you see. But not only did he fail to stimulate, motivate, or educate, he was also inarticulate. He began by saying crucifixation, and he was right. It is a fixation with crucifying. He stumbled over anesthesia, probably happens when you are applied the anesthetic, but was not able to say anything in favor of his arguments. He mentioned what we were trying to say, but he didn't contradict them. Here is what we are trying to say. First of all, taking a leaf from Mr. Guptu's book, museums suit the majority. To clarify, it suits the center, relegating the other. I found Johns Hopkins University mentioned that was the scene where Derrida delivered his seminal lecture in which he brought in the concept of deconstruction for the first time, where he said that all through the Middle Ages and in European history, the oral has been considered the voice of God, and even writing has always been considered a system in which there is a center and a periphery. Unfortunately, we believe that commemoration relegates those in the periphery and celebrates a center. That is a point which is serious, may I say. We're not always tomfooling about. We say that commemoration, and particularly the culture of commemoration, engenders homogeneity, which is something not to be, really looked forward to. It engenders repetition. It promotes the status quo and salutes centers of power. Therefore, commemoration always celebrates the dominating power and does not allow the other to speak out, which is very bad for the subalterns, certainly. Commemoration forgets the true sacrifice and makes you miss the wood for the trees. It doesn't talk about the actual sacrifice of the people being commemorated or of his family, but talks about the dominant order which may